Which religion advanced Western civilization more, Christianity or Islam? The answer is Islam, and it's not even a question. You might be thinking that Europe made all of these advancements and they were Christian nations. And it's true, Europe was Christian and they made all of these scientific advancements, but they did that in spite of the church. Galileo, Dante, Marco Polo, Giordano Bruno were all great thinkers, scientists, and mathematicians who were imprisoned or executed by the church because their teachings went against dogma. Nicholas Copernicus did not allow his work to be published until after he passed away, which means that the evolution of science, mathematics, and just human thought evolved despite the church, not because of it. It's like capitalism emerging supreme even though all the aristocracy of Europe tried to stop it. Now let's go back to the Middle Ages, between 500 to let's say 1300, when all of Europe was united by the same kind of Christianity. The countries were still warring brutally with one another, most of the population was illiterate, and any teachings and breakthrough that remotely contradicted what the clergy was saying was shut down. In Christian Europe, the Bible was written in Latin, which only a small percentage of the population was able to understand. So if you were a regular farmer, you would just have to trust the priest to say, yes, what I'm reading to you is actually in the Bible. While in the Caliphates, the Quran was written in Arabic, and if you could read Arabic, you could read the Word of God. And the exact opposite was going on in the Muslim Caliphates. While the Christianization of Europe just led to more war and barbarity, unity was actually taking place in the Middle East and Northern Africa. The ancient cultures of Persia and Egypt merged with the center at Baghdad. The largest city in Christian Europe, if you do want to include the Byzantine Empire, was Constantinople, which had a population of about 400,000 people. Baghdad had a population between 700,000 to 1 million. Baghdad was the largest and most prosperous cultured city in the world for centuries under the Abbasid Caliphate. The three cities during the Middle Ages with the best universities in the world were in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. Those universities existed 2 centuries before the first one in Europe, which was either Oxford or the one at Bologna. No city on earth today could compare to what Baghdad was. It would have been a combination of New York, Tokyo, and the Vatican. Another huge similarity between New York City and Baghdad was that they had a large Jewish population that actually lived in safety. While Christian Europe was massacring or force converting Jewish populations left and right, and the Byzantine Empire was doing it on a slightly less horrifying level, the Jewish population got to coexist with Christians, Muslims, and anyone of any other faith as long as they paid the jizya, the tax. The caliphates were much more tolerant of diversity than any of their current peers. And while Europe did have one unifying language, which was Latin, where the educated people could speak to one another through a lot of the countries, that was a luxury of the very few. But the entirety of the Muslim Caliphate was unified by one language, from Spain to Persia, which was Arabic. And yes, of course, all of these other countries had their own language, but they were unified by one common living language that was much more easily accessible than something like Latin. Fun fact, Charlemagne, the leader of the Frankish Empire, which was the largest empire that Europe saw during the Middle Ages, was actually friends with Harun al-Rashid, the leader of the Abbasid Caliphate. They never met, but they had a very healthy diplomatic relationship to the point of Harun al-Rashid sending him an elephant. But the greatest gift that Rashid gave Charlemagne, by far, was a water clock, which is something that the Europeans have never seen and won't for the next few centuries. And while Europe was going through its own caste system under feudalism, proto-capitalism was growing under the Caliphates. And yes, it was the Crusades which forcefully opened up trade between the Caliphates and the rest of Europe. And the Renaissance, which was the launch pad for European advancement, would not have happened without the Caliphate's preservation of the works of Plato, Aristotle, and a host of other Greek and Roman thinkers. But all of that came to an end when the Mongol invasions took place and they destroyed all of the great cities, including Baghdad, which was decimated. All of the libraries were burnt down and tons of the books were thrown into the rivers, to the point where people said that the rivers ran black. It was the complete and total destruction wrought by the Mongolian Empire that allowed the Caliphates to be easily conquered by the small Ottoman Empire, which eventually grew to become the Muslim seat of power as we knew it. There are a lot of horrible things to be said about the Ottoman Empire. I would look up Janissaries because that's pure tragedy. And the Ottoman Empire got to enjoy the wealth and prosperity brought about by the Caliphates for centuries until that empire itself met its eventual demise. And after 1453, the Renaissance was spurred even further as the city of Constantinople, which was the seat of the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Ottomans, and all of the scholars of that great city and empire fled to the rest of Europe. And yes, I'm aware that there is a huge gap in advancement now between the Middle Eastern countries and, let's say, the West. But Islam is not at fault for this lack of advancement, just like Christianity is not responsible for all the scientific development over the past 5-6 centuries. The printing press is what allowed Europeans to read the Bible in the vernacular, and the Ottoman Empire resisted the adoption of that. While Europe was catching up to the advancements of the Middle East and North Africa, the Ottomans were strengthening their grip and quite primitive compared to their predecessors. While Europe was advancing further and forward, despite the influence of the Christian Church, the Ottoman Empire only cared about cementing their grasp and conquering their neighbors. By the mid-1800s, while Europe was industrializing heavily, the Ottoman Empire was still living like it was the 1600s. That allowed Europe to carve up the Middle East to do whatever they wanted with. And here we are. Now, the Westerners are thinking that they have always had this cultural superiority as they read Plato, Aristotle, and all of these other great thinkers from history, and they have no idea that the only reason why they can look upon these words is because the Arabs and the Muslim Caliphates saved those works. My name is the Geo Hussar. No, I am not Muslim, I am not Christian, I am not Jewish. I have no horse in the race of Abrahamic religions. I just think that y'all should know that the Arabs and the Muslims in general brought us a lot of what we have today. Thanks for watching.